I never thought I'd see the day when my heart could break without a single scream, a tear, or a fight. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where nothing seems out of place, where the hum of the washing machine and the ticking of the wall clock blend into a rhythm of routine. I'd just come back from the grocery store. My knees were aching, and my hands were raw from carrying heavy bags. I was taking off my shoes when I heard his voice, Frank's voice, from the living room. He was talking to Nurse Marcia. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just moving slowly, quietly. The door was open. Their voices carried. "I don't know how she does it," Nurse Marcia said gently. 17 years is a long time. Frank chuckled, that dry, sharp kind of laugh he used to make before the accident. "Please," he scoffed. "She's not some saint. She's just a free servant. Always here, always cleaning, always fussing. I never asked her to give up her life." I stood frozen. I didn't drop the bag of vegetables. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. But something inside me cracked wide open. 17 years. I'd given him 17 years of my life, not just in marriage, but in caretaking, in silence, in sacrifice. I had bathed him, fed him, turned him in bed at night when his body ached. I'd missed weddings, funerals, family reunions. I stopped seeing my friends. I lost my job. And now I was just a free servant. I walked in slowly. My hands were shaking, but I looked calm. Frank didn't even glance at me. He was still smirking, proud of what he'd said. Nurse Marcia's eyes darted toward me, wide and uneasy. She opened her mouth, maybe to warn him, maybe to soften the moment. But I wasn't in the mood for softness. I walked straight to the diaper bag. I took out one of his adult diapers, the same kind I had been changing for nearly 2 decades, and placed it gently in his lap. He looked down at it, then up at me. His smile faded. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I just looked him in the eyes and said, "Good luck taking care of yourself." Then I turned around and walked out of the room. I don't even remember how I made it to the hallway. My feet were moving on their own. My mind was somewhere else, floating through memories of our early years, the accident, the promises I made, the quiet prayers I used to whisper at night. This wasn't just about one cruel sentence. It was about the years behind it, the love I poured in, the parts of myself I buried, the loneliness I swallowed every time I told myself, "He's just in pain, he doesn't mean it." But now I knew. He meant it. He always had. I stood in the hallway for a long time, my back against the wall. Nurse Marcia didn't come out right away. Maybe she was too stunned, maybe she didn't know what to say. But I knew this much. I wasn't going back in that room. Not today. Maybe not ever. If you've ever had to choose between loving someone and loving yourself, you're not alone. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because this story is just beginning. I have a lot more to tell you, and trust me, it only gets deeper from here. 17 years ago, my life looked nothing like it does now. I had a job I loved, a small flower shop just 2 blocks from our home. Frank and I were happy, or at least I thought we were. We laughed a lot. We dreamed big. We raised our daughter, Debbie, the best we could. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Then came the accident. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening. Frank had gone out to meet an old friend. He wasn't drinking, wasn't distracted, just unlucky. A drunk driver ran a red light. By the time I got to the hospital, everything had already changed. Frank was awake, but barely. The doctor told me the spinal cord damage was irreversible. Paralysis from the waist down. They said he'd need round-the-clock care. Therapy, medication, constant repositioning, feeding assistance, all of it. I nodded. I didn't cry. I just asked, "What do I have to do?" Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You step up, you don't think about yourself, you just act. I sold the flower shop 2 weeks later. It broke my heart, but I told myself I'd reopen it one day. I took training courses for home caregiving. I moved his hospital bed into our bedroom and set alarms on my phone for every feeding, every movement, every medication. Friends called at first, some came by. But over time, the calls slowed. The visits stopped. People went back to their lives. I stayed frozen in mine. I remember one night, maybe 6 months after the accident, I was holding Frank up in the bathroom. He was frustrated, shouting at me to move faster. His body was heavy, his patience thin. When I finally got him settled back in bed, I looked down at my arms. They were trembling from the weight of him. But I told myself, it's okay. He's just adjusting. He's in pain. And I kept going. We couldn't afford a full-time nurse, and Frank didn't want strangers around. So it was just me. I bathed him, changed him, fed him, shaved him, trimmed his nails. I even learned to do light physical therapy so his muscles wouldn't completely give out. Debbie was in college back then. She called often, offered to come home, but I always told her not to worry. I didn't want her to feel the heaviness I was carrying. I figured if I just held on long enough, things would get easier. But they didn't. The Frank I married started fading away. He wasn't affectionate anymore. He barely looked at me when I spoke. He stopped saying thank you. And every time I asked how he was feeling, he just grunted or snapped, like my questions annoyed him. Still, I kept at it, because I believed, deeply, that loyalty meant staying, that love meant sacrificing, that my duty as a wife was to endure. So I endured. I gave up my business, my social life, my hobbies, even my sleep. I told myself it was temporary, that one day he'd get better, or at least see what I was doing and appreciate it. But appreciation never came. Instead, the silence between us grew louder. He spent hours watching TV, not even acknowledging me. Sometimes days would go by without him asking how I was doing. Still, I stayed. Because that's what wives do, right? But deep down, something was changing in me. Slowly, quietly. A small voice I kept trying to ignore. It whispered things like, "You deserve more than this." Back then, I pushed that voice aside. I reminded myself of vows and promises and the sacred bond of marriage. But looking back now, maybe I should have listened to that voice sooner. There's a strange kind of heartbreak that doesn't come all at once. It creeps in slowly, quiet, steady, until one day, you wake up and realize you don't recognize the person lying next to you. That's how it was with Frank. After the accident, I told myself he just needed time. Of course he'd be angry. Of course he'd feel helpless. I expected the mood swings, the silence, the frustration. I kept making excuses for him, telling myself, it's the injury, not him. But months turned into years. And the Frank I knew, the man who used to bring me tea on cold mornings, who laughed at my terrible jokes, who danced with me in the kitchen when our favorite song came on, that man slowly vanished. What took his place was someone cold, detached, bitter. He started treating me like a nurse, not a partner, not a wife, just someone who was supposed to do things for him. I'd bring him his food and he'd say, "It's too cold," or "You use too much salt." I'd change his sheets and he wouldn't even look at me. Not a thank you, not a smile, just silence, or complaints. The worst part? I still loved him, even when he made me feel invisible. I remember one night in particular. It had been a long day. He'd spilled soup on the bed, gotten angry, and told me to stop hovering like a maid. I cleaned everything, changed his clothes, and got him settled. Then I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor. I didn't cry. I was too tired for tears. I just sat there, staring at the tiles, wondering when I had stopped being Dorcas and started being just someone who serves. I missed hearing my name. I missed being touched. I missed the woman I used to be, the one with dreams, with laughter, with color in her life. Now, my world was a blur of gray routines. Wake him up, bathe him, feed him, administer meds, turn him, listen to him sigh, groan, yell, go to bed, wake up again. There were good moments, small ones. like when he watched old movies and chuckled quietly, or when he hummed a tune from our wedding day. I'd cling to those moments, pretending they meant things were getting better, but deep down I knew better. Frank wasn't getting better. He was getting colder. He began saying things like, "You're lucky I don't ask for more," or, "At least I'm not completely useless." It was like he wanted me to feel guilty for still being able to walk, breathe, move, as if my ability to live made him hate me. I tried talking to him, gently, kindly. I'd say, "Frank, I miss us." He'd stare at the TV and mumble, "Nothing's stopping you from leaving." And yet, I stayed. I still don't know why exactly. Maybe it was duty, maybe guilt, maybe the tiny flicker of hope that he'd wake up one day and see me again, not just as a caregiver but as his wife. But that day never came. Our daughter Debbie called sometimes, asking how things were. I told her we were fine. I lied. Not to protect Frank, but to protect her. She was building a life. I didn't want her to carry my burden. That was my choice, not hers. Still, the silence in the house grew heavier. Even the birds outside seemed quieter. Some days, the only words I'd hear were commands. More water. I need the remote. Turn me. Never, how are you? Never, thank you. I used to write poems. Did I ever tell you that? Tiny, sweet poems about flowers, about the way sunlight hits the window in the morning. I haven't written in years. One day I found my old notebook. The pages were yellowed, but the ink was still clear. The last poem I wrote said, "A woman stands in silence wide, not lost, but slowly set aside." That's what I had become. Not angry, not broken, just slowly set aside. But I didn't know then that things were about to shift, that a small change was coming, one I didn't even see yet. The days started to blend into each other like an old photograph left out in the sun, colorless and fading. I stopped keeping track of time. Was it Tuesday, Sunday? It didn't matter. My routine never changed. Wake up, check on Frank, prepare his meds, change him, feed him, clean up, sit, repeat. The outside world moved on without me. I used to get phone calls, text messages, invitations, friends from the flower shop, women from church, neighbors I used to chat with during evening walks. They all disappeared over time. Not out of cruelty, I don't think, just life. People move on. And I guess I didn't. Birthdays came and went without a card or cake. I once stood in the kitchen looking at a candle I'd found in the drawer. I almost lit it for myself. But what was the point? Even holidays stopped feeling like holidays. No decorations, no visitors, just Frank asking, "What day is it again?" as I handed him his pill cup. The house felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. There were days I didn't say a single word until evening. Just the soft clink of dishes or the shuffle of slippers against the floor. I remember once hearing laughter from the neighbor's house, children playing in the yard. I stood by the window and watched for a full 10 minutes, just listening. It felt like another world, one I didn't belong to anymore. Then came Nurse Marcia. The doctor suggested I bring in part-time help after I fainted in the kitchen one morning from exhaustion. I'd been up all night with Frank, who had stomach pain and wouldn't stop moaning. By dawn, I hadn't eaten or slept in almost 48 hours. That's when reality hit. I couldn't keep doing this alone. Marcia came twice a week for a few hours. At first, Frank hated the idea. He refused to speak to her, made sarcastic comments, told her I was the only one who knew what he needed. But I stood my ground. I told him this was not up for discussion. I needed help. Not wanted. Needed. Marcia was soft-spoken and calm, maybe in her early 40s. She had kind eyes that didn't pity me, just understood. She did the work with quiet focus, never overstepped, never judged, just helped. The first time she arrived, I almost cried just watching someone else lift the wheelchair without sighing. It felt strange at first, letting someone else step into this little world I'd been locked in for so long. But little by little, it brought a small shift. Not in Frank, he stayed the same. Cold, distant, but in me. With Marcia there, I had 2 hours to myself. I'd go sit in the backyard, feel the breeze, watch the sky. Sometimes I'd bring a cup of tea and sip it slowly, not from a travel mug, not standing by a hospital bed, but seated, relaxed. I started journaling again. Small entries. Today the breeze felt nice. Marcia smiled when she saw my roses. I heard music playing from a passing car. Tiny observations. But they felt like life. One day Marcia caught me humming in the kitchen. "You have a beautiful voice," she said gently. I hadn't even realized I was humming. That night, I sat on my bed and cried for the first time in years. Not out of pain, but because I felt something stirring inside me. Something like myself. Still, I wasn't naive. Frank wasn't changing. If anything, he seemed more annoyed by my small moments of joy. Like my peace was a threat to him. He would make comments like, "You seem very happy when that nurse is around," or, "Don't get too comfortable with your little breaks." But I said nothing. Because in those quiet hours, I wasn't his servant. I wasn't invisible. I was just Dorcas again. And that small return, it was everything. When Debbie called and said she was coming home for the weekend, my heart leapt, not out of excitement, but from nerves I hadn't felt in years. It had been months since her last visit. She was always busy. Work, travel, life. I never blamed her. She'd grown up watching me give everything to Frank. I wanted better for her. I didn't want her trapped the way I felt. But this time, I needed her. I needed someone to see me. I cleaned the guest room, made her favorite stew, and even found an old family photo to place on her nightstand. The one where we're all smiling by the beach before everything went dark. When she arrived, she looked so full of life. Healthy, glowing, energized. She hugged me tight, and I held on longer than I should have. Then she went into the living room. "Hi, Daddy," she said with a cheerful tone. Frank lit up like a child at Christmas. I hadn't seen him smile like that in years. "My sweet girl," he said, his voice suddenly warm and full of emotion. They chatted, laughed, shared memories. For a moment, it was like I didn't exist. That night after dinner, I asked if we could talk. Just the two of us. We sat on the porch. The crickets were chirping. The air smelled like rain. "I'm tired, Debbie," I said softly. "I'm not okay." She looked confused. "What do you mean, Mom?" I hesitated, but then the words just poured out. "I'm worn out. Your dad's... He's not the man he used to be. He doesn't talk to me, doesn't say thank you. Some days he treats me like I'm just part of the furniture. I've done everything I can, and I feel like I'm disappearing." She stared at me, silent. I could see her mind working, trying to process it all. Finally, she spoke. "Mom, he's paralyzed. He's not himself. Of course he's going to be angry. You can't take it all so personally." I felt my chest tighten. "I'm not taking it personally, Debbie. I'm living it every day alone." She shook her head. "You're not alone. You have Marcia now. And you chose this. You always told me love meant sacrifice." I blinked, stunned. So I should just accept being treated like I don't matter? "No, but, I mean, he's going through more than you are." I stood up, unable to sit still. "He may have lost the use of his legs, but I've lost myself, Debbie. I gave up everything, for him, for us, and now he won't even look me in the eye." She crossed her arms. "Maybe he's just tired too. Maybe he feels like a burden." "He is a burden," I said, then paused, horrified by my own words. "But I never made him feel like one. I never threw it in his face. I cared for him with everything I had." Debbie frowned. "You sound bitter." I turned away so she wouldn't see my eyes welling up. "I sound tired. That's all." The next day, I caught her talking to Frank in low voices. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. "She's just overwhelmed, Dad. Maybe ease up a bit," she said. And Frank, without missing a beat, replied, "She's dramatic, always has been." My stomach twisted. Later, she hugged me goodbye. "You'll be okay, Mom. Just hang in there." Hang in there. That's what everyone always said. Like I was clinging to a ledge and the solution was just to hold on tighter, even if my fingers were bleeding. After she left, I sat alone on the porch. The stew was still in the fridge, the family photo back on the shelf. She didn't see me. Not really. And maybe neither did he. But one person did, Marcia. The next time she came, she looked at me closely and asked, "You okay today?" I nodded. But in my heart, something had changed. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. Dinner was simple that night, just mashed potatoes and grilled fish. Frank used to like it that way. I had made it a dozen times before without issue, but this time, as I set the tray in front of him, he looked down, sniffed, and sneered. "What's this garbage? You trying to choke me now?" I blinked. "It's what you asked for, Frank." He shoved the tray to the floor. The plate crashed. Potatoes splattered across the carpet. I gasped, not because of the mess, but because something in me snapped. "Clean it up," he said sharply, like I was a waitress who got the order wrong. I stood frozen. Then, slowly, I bent down and picked up the broken plate with my bare hands, pieces of ceramic biting into my fingers. I didn't even feel the sting. I was too numb. Marcia was standing in the hallway. She had arrived just a few minutes before it happened and had seen it all. She didn't say a word, just watched, eyes wide, her lips pressed tight. Once the mess was cleared and Frank had been fed again, this time without complaint, Marcia and I stepped into the kitchen. "You shouldn't let him talk to you like that," she said, gently but firmly. I forced a tired smile. "He's just angry. This isn't who he is." But the words felt false. Even as I said them, she tilted her head. "Isn't it?" I had no answer. My throat tightened, and I busied myself wiping down the already clean counter. Later that night, I went to the laundry room to fold clothes. That room had become my safe space. No beeping machines, no wheelchairs, no sighs or demands. Just quiet and warmth from the dryer. Then I heard them talking. Frank and Marcia. Their voices were low, but the walls were thin. I wasn't trying to listen, but I couldn't help it. "She's always hovering," Frank muttered. "Acts like she's some kind of saint. Truth is, she just likes playing the victim." There was a pause. Then he added with a dry chuckle, 17 years and she still doesn't realize she's just a free servant." The words hit me like a slap. I dropped the towel in my hand. My heart pounded in my chest. I walked to the door, barely breathing. "She's lucky I even tolerate her fussing around me," Frank continued. "If I could move, I'd handle things myself. But since I can't, I let her have her little power trip." My hands were trembling. My feet moved before my mind could stop them. I walked into the living room, calm, quiet. Frank didn't notice me at first. He was still chuckling. Marcia's eyes darted up and locked with mine. She looked guilty, but not surprised. Frank turned slowly, and when he saw me, his face paled. I said nothing. I went to the corner of the room where the supplies were kept, pulled out one of his adult diapers, walked straight to his chair, and placed it gently in his lap. He looked down at it, then up at me, confused. "What's this?" "Good luck taking care of yourself," I said. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I just turned and walked away. I didn't slam the door, I didn't cry. I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. My reflection stared back at me from the closet mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see a caregiver. I saw a woman who had finally reached her limit. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was upset, not because I was sad, but because for the first time in 17 years, I was thinking about me. I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. I could still hear Frank shuffling around in the living room, grumbling and calling my name. But I didn't move. He'd figure it out. By morning, The house felt different. The air was still. The birds were chirping outside, just like they always did. But this time, I noticed them. I actually heard them. I got up quietly, pulled out a small suitcase, and began packing. I didn't need much, just a few clothes, my journal, my toothbrush. I placed the suitcase on the bed and zipped it shut. There was no anger in my body, just peace. I walked into the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. Just for me. I sat at the small table by the window and sipped it slowly. No one was calling me. No one was interrupting. For once, the moment belonged to me. When Marcia arrived for her regular shift, she looked surprised to see the suitcase by the door. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said simply. "I just need to go for a while." She looked at me, really looked at me. Then she nodded. "Do what you need to do." I left a list of instructions for Frank on the counter. He would have Marcia here, and if needed, Debbie could be called. I wasn't abandoning him. I was releasing myself. When I stepped outside with my bag, I felt the sun on my face like I hadn't felt in years. It warmed me in places I thought had gone cold forever. I didn't have a big plan. I didn't have a destination. But I knew I couldn't stay in that house one more minute pretending I didn't matter. I checked into a small women's retreat center just an hour away. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place with clean sheets and kind voices. That first night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, but this time I smiled. The silence wasn't heavy. It was mine. I started journaling again. Every morning. Pages and pages poured out. I wrote about the girl I used to be, the woman I had become, and the version of myself I still wanted to meet. I didn't know what the next chapter of my life would look like, but for once, I was ready to find out. On the third day, I took a walk through the nearby woods. I found a small wooden bench facing a pond, and I sat there for hours watching the water ripple with the wind. I let myself cry, not out of pain, but from release. 17 years is a long time to be invisible. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I called Debbie that evening. She sounded worried at first, but I spoke calmly, clearly. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I just needed space. I needed to remember who I am." There was a pause on the line. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." And for the first time in a long time, I believed she meant it. She asked if I'd come back soon. "I don't know," I told her honestly. "But when I do, it'll be on my terms." After we hung up, I looked out at the darkening sky and breathed in deeply. No one was calling my name. No one was barking orders. No one was scoffing at my efforts. Just me, alive, healing, free. Thank you for following my story. If you've ever lost yourself while caring for others, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unloved, know this: you deserve more. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Comment below if you've ever had to choose yourself after years of sacrifice. Like and share if this story touched you. Your voice matters. Your story matters. You matter.